Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. I'm Greg Tito, and today I'm joined by Mr.
Adam Lee.
Hi, Mr. Adam Lee. How
Hello,
are
Mr.
you?
Greg Tito. I'm doing fine.
This little segment is where we talk about lore in the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse
Yes.
for your education and edification, or maybe to apply to your game
Yeah.
as a dungeon master or player.
Yeah.
And today we are going to talk about the Anauroch Desert.
Yes.
It is a desert in the Forgotten Realms.
Yes.
A Faerun,
Faerun.
as they call it.
Yes.
Where is the Anauroch Desert in relation to things like the Sword Coast?
So, it is east of the Sword Coast. If you go inland, you'll cross forests and mountain ranges, and then eventually you will get to this blasted sort of wasteland. And the Anauroch Desert is enormous. It is huge, and it's kind of a vertical enormity.
Okay.
Like the Sahara kind of goes east-west.
Yes.
Really big. It is big north-south, but bigger east-west. Anauroch is bigger north-south than it is east-west.
Okay. Is it similar in size to the Sahara Desert in Africa?
Yeah, it might even be bigger.
Oh.
It's big. And the weird thing about Anauroch is that it is part of it is desert, and then the other part is an ice desert.
Oh.
It is a place called the High Ice, and it is.
I knew a guy in college like that.
Yeah, that dude. I think we all knew that dude. High Ice, and he was always chilled.
He was very chilled.
Yeah.
So it's like very dry still.
Very
but
dry.
But the frozen cold is
It's
what's
frozen
keeping it that
cold,
way.
and it goes the cool thing in the world is like nobody has ever mapped the full north extent of the High Ice. It goes way the heck up there. It kind of loops around. So if you're looking at the map, it kind of loops around, and it eventually connects up to the spine of the world and the Ragged Glacier and all that. So, Anauroch is enormous north-south, like a desert of ice, and then that leads into the Plain of the Standing Stones, which is basically a giant graveyard of fallen Netheril. Netherese flying cities that crashed in the ground when Karsus screwed up and blew everything apart, and the weave almost collapsed, and Mystra had to sacrifice herself, and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff happened, and then it created this sort of wasteland. And so you can walk through the Plain of Standing Stones, which is part of the Anauroch Desert, and you will see these, wrecked, ruined cities. And they're a lot of them have been scoured away. Some of them are buried under sand, but then some of them are sticking out. And then you can go dungeon delving in there and explore fallen Netheril in the Anauroch Desert. Yeah.
Okay, so we've mentioned the Netherese and the Netheril Empire a couple of times on some lore segments in the past. But what's the quick overview as to what is 3,000 years in the past, if not more?
3,800. Yeah. So it's minus 3,800 DR. It was kind of in that area when the Netheril begins, and it begins as like a very humble fishing village. And some elves come along and said, "Hey guys, you want to learn some magic?" And they're like, "Sure, this will be great." And then it blows out of control, like what humans do with magic. It's a cautionary tale for our guests. Don't like giving power to us, like a society or a culture that's not ready for it, can have grave problems later on. So the elves learned this, and I think they're called the Erlani elves anyway. So they're like, hey, we'll teach these humans magic. They'll be awesome with it. It'll be great. We'll all live together happy. And holy crap, things go wrong. So
so the Netherese were human. Oh, see, I for some reason I think I took that little bit that the knowledge came from the elves, and just assumed it was more of an elvish society. It's not; it's a human society.
They were just little fisher people. They were just kind of hanging out by what was then a nice little lake or a sea, inland sea, and they were just doing their thing. And then the elves, it's like the gods must be crazy. Like this thing comes down and just now they're obsessed with magic. So
so in a few centuries' time, they are able to have flying cities and technology.
Yeah. So it got to a point where they were doing fine, but then they started to enslave gnomes, and elves were like, "Oh, we didn't know it was going to go that way," and the humans started doing more and more funky things, and then they discovered high elven magic. So when they discovered this thing called the Nether Scrolls, that was high elven magic, and they knew enough by that time what they'd been taught by the Erlani to be able to understand these Nether Scrolls. And from there, the Nether Scrolls were kind of like showing you the fundamental kind of workings of how you could create magic. Not just The Nether Scrolls weren't like, here's a lightning bolt spell and here's a flashbang spell or whatever. These were like, this is how you construct magic out of the raw weave.
From the weave itself.
And so then humans began, they were like, well, screw the Orlani. We don't even need to talk to you guys anymore. We're going to look at these things. So the Netherese went full on into the Nether Scrolls. And from that, they created this thing called the Mythallar. And from that, these amazing human wizards, came out of it. Some famous ones like Ioun was one of these Netherese wizards.
Oh, Ioun was a Netherese wizard. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Ioun stones were kind of from what had been learned from the Nether Scrolls. So then also there's a wizard called Iolam, and that wizard was the one who created Mythallars. And Mythallars were basically batteries that you could. It was kind of like you didn't need the weave anymore. You could power magic through a Mythallar, and it allowed the Netherese wizards to create amazingly powerful spells. So they had almost infinite power, and then they also had the fundamental workings of how magic and the weave worked. And so these Netherese wizards were like, you know what? We don't really need the gods. Like their sort of big theory was that the gods are kind of like archmages. They're like, there's no real difference between us and gods other than that these gods are archmages that have discovered magic that's just even more powerful than what we know. But the thing is that they had the Nether Scrolls, and they're like, these Nether Scrolls are going to give us access to becoming like these gods. And so ultimate hubris, of course, because they're just like...
Right. This was the quick version, right?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So then the Netherese, eventually over time, the Netherese became corrupted.
Yeah. Okay.
And the cities fell.
The cities
How
fell.
did the cities fall? It was the magic.
Karsus. There's this dude called Karsus, and he's a super powerful Netherese wizard. Like, he was casting spells at the age of 2, and at the age of 20, he made his first floating.
Casting spells since I was 2.
Yeah, he's like, bam. so Karsus, eventually he's going to cast this spell that's going to allow them to take over the weave and recreate it in their image and all this stuff. And and Mistral at that time,
the goddess of magic,
is like, the heck you ain't. And so Karsus launches this spell. It destabilizes the weave. Everything goes crazy. And Mistral sacrifices herself to save the weave and cut out basically all magic. At that point goes really wonky, and then all magic just turns off.
Wow.
And the things that were holding up the Netherese cities is like gone, and they go and
they all crash.
They crash.
Right. Into the Anauroch Desert.
Into the Anauroch Desert, yes. At the same time, because the Netherese were doing so much experimental magic that dealt with different planes, like planes of shadow and planes of the elemental planes. Like, you always see the big Netherese floating cities, and there's waterfalls just falling. You're like, well, where don't they run out of water? Those waterfalls are actually being pulled from the elemental plane of water.
I see.
And it's just running. So you've got all the water you ever need. So anyway, the Netherese, by doing all this stuff, they disturb these aberrations called the Faerun. And the Faerun cast this spell. They invent this spell called Life Drain. And it's a life drain, and that's what starts the desertification of the Anauroch Desert, because at that time it used to be a lush green wonderland,
right?
Where the Netherese society was happening. Well, the Faerun like, screw you guys, and they create this life draining spell that just starts to wither everything.
Oh,
so there at that point, there's what's called High Netheril and Low Netheril. High Netheril, all the people up in the floating cities, and they're like, yeah, we don't care what's going on down there. It can be a desert, whatever. Low Netheril, like, we hate you guys. Screw you. Because High Netheril are the ones who have all the magical power. And it's like, if you want to come up to our floating city, which is awesome, you're going to have to basically bow to us, the big super Netherese wizards who have read the Nether Scrolls and they know all this stuff. So it creates this societal gap between the haves and the have-nots, the powerful and the not so powerful.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Faerun spell happens. The High Netheril, they don't care about it. The low Netherese.
This was happening before Karsus, and
this was happening before Karsus.
I see. So there was already a desert occurring. How many? Do you know, like, how many centuries, or
maybe 600?
Okay, so it was
600 years before it all happens.
So the desert was already kind of well in place.
It's starting to happen. In fact, Karsus is one of his big things was, how am I going to stop the Faerun? Nobody knew at that point how to do it.
So he's going to send godhood so that he can do that.
He's going to get super powerful. He's going to take over the magic, the weave, because Mistral at that time, because there was Mistral and now it's Mistra. Mistral, who was at that time governing all the magic in the weave, she was putting limits on things. Like, humans can only cast so much magic. That's it. Well, with the Mythalars and the Nether Scrolls and Karsus saying, well, now I'm going to take all the limits off. So he kind of goes against, and that's when that whole thing happened. So,
I see. Okay, so then the ships, or not the ships, the cities are collapsing, they're falling down, and they get embedded because most of them were around the Anauroch Desert, although there were some all over the planet of Toril,
yeah,
right?
they floated around, but they were mainly kind of contained in this Anauroch Desert area.
Oh, so that's why there's so many of the crashed cities there.
Yeah,
I
and
see.
in fact, there might have been some like reason why they didn't kind of go outside of those borders. But
so what was on these cities that is now embedded below the desert?
All kinds of stuff. I mean, High Netheril at its peak was some amazing, mind-blowing stuff, because everything was created by magic. And there are these stones. I'm trying to remember what they're like, chardolene or chardal something. Anyway,
Charizard? No, wait.
Yeah, Charizard. Yeah. I choose you, Charizard. But there are these stones that you can cast a spell into it. It goes into, and the spell goes into the stone and stays there. And then all you have to do is crush the stone, and that spell will fire off. There's magical stuff in the land. There's all sorts of things. Like, if you're going to run an adventure in the Plane of Standing Stones, you can come upon all this fun nethery stuff that is all magical in nature. You're going to have the cool magic items. As a DM, you can make up some really far out, super powerful magic items that, all players will be tempted by, but there always should be some kind of, dark twist to it. If you get this thing, you're playing with power beyond your sort of your pay grade.
I like that. I like that because there's always that draw for more powerful magic items or something that can make your character. I mean, all characters are treasure hunters to a certain extent, right? So they want to get some of that stuff, but it's got to have a monkey's paw kind of consequence to it.
Yeah, totally. And it totally fits in with the theme of like Netheril and what happened to it, and sort of now the wasteland of Anauroch.
Who lives in the Anauroch Desert now?
So there's a couple different kinds of things going on. So because it's this big north-south desert, it's a natural sort of barrier between the Sword Coast and that area, and then the eastern parts, so like Thay and Thar and the Moon Sea and
those are all on the eastern side of the desert.
Yeah, so you can go a long way around and then go up, or you can try to cut across the Anauroch Desert. So it's kind of like, Seattle and you want to get to Port Angeles. It's like you can go down through Tacoma and up, or you can just go straight across. Well, because the Anauroch Desert's there and it's super dangerous, and there's all kinds of netheries, traps and pitfalls and stuff, and magical bombs and whatever you want to put there, and just nasty monsters like genies and null bands. There are these people that are there. Now, some of them are descended from the Netherese people, and some of them are just imports, people who kind of came there and just were sort of scavenging on sort of the ruined cities, and then just kind of decided they were going to live there. And they're called the Bedine people. So there's also the Datarig people as well, and they are descended from dwarves. They're like almost like half dwarf, and we haven't done anything with them in 5e yet, but that they're there in the old lore. And then also the Gentarum are all in that place because there's a lot of magic, and it's
if they're the Black Network, they're actually taking that and selling that. They can.
Yeah, they're selling that stuff, and then also because it is desolate and there's sort of there's all kinds of dungeons and stuff in there. They create sort of strongholds there where you can go and hide out, and nobody can find you when you're in Anauroch. So there's a crisscross of trails. And those trails are patrolled mostly by the Bedine people, and they can either act as guides or they can be bandits. So if you are escorting a caravan across the desert, you've either got to pay the Bedin or you've got to get ready to rumble because they're going to come at you. And they're like an honor bound. They're sort of like a Klingon race. They're very, they're warriors. They detest magic, probably because of the myths that have been told about the Netherese.
Were they mostly descended from the low Netherese? Is that why they
possibly
might have that built-in belief?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I didn't even think of that, but that's probably exactly why they're like that.
Yeah.
That because of these myths about how wizards couldn't be trusted, and so if you're a wizard and you're crossing, then you're going to have to deal with the Bedin and sort of like assure them that you're not sort of, or that you're on the up and up and you're not going to like use your powers for bad
to make deserts everywhere, not just here.
Yeah,
right.
So yeah, and they have they have a lot of traditions and things, and you can, if you get in with them and you become pals and friends, then you can learn a lot about the desert and how to survive there, and how to all the different oases that you can keep yourself alive as you move across the desert. And also if you get in with the Bedin, they could probably show you dungeons, places to go, treasure troves,
ones that have been exhausted and
yes.
ones that might still have a lot more left over.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What about the idea that setting a campaign in the Anauroch desert? Like, how would you go about that? And I'm wondering if we can take some inspiration maybe from the Mournlands that are talked about in the Eberron Rising from the Last War, and see if there's any crossover there.
Yeah, they're very similar in the sense that there's not a lot known about both of them. They're both magical wastelands. Like, Anauroch is not a natural desert. It is a magical desert. Like, if you cast Detect Magic, the whole Anauroch desert would just glow.
Oh, no.
Like, it has been created by magic. So, and the Mournland, same thing. The Mournland was created by some weird magical event that nobody understands or nobody knows. Anauroch the history is pretty well understood of what happened and why it happened the way it happened.
So yeah, if you were a dungeon master or a player who maybe wants to play as a Bedin people or something like that, like what are some character ideas you might have or something like that?
Well, for one, I mean, if you were like, okay, you could have all your players roll up characters who are Bedin, and then it's a matter of there's a reoccurrence of a Faerûn, like these underground horrible creatures.
What do those aberrations look like?
Basically, they're like a windsock, and at the open end, it's just a circular row of teeth, and there's 4 arms that stick out, and they fly and hover around, and they are totally evil, and they kind of use telepathy to try to force their way into your mind, and it's not pleasant at all. And they're very powerful, and they're just bent on the destruction of life, anything other than a Faerûn.
So, like, really sweet guys.
They are. They make great plushies for the kids.
I just want to give them a hug.
Yeah. So those things, they were running wild, and then there was a deal that was done with. There was a consortium of the gods that got together, and they got in touch with these beings called the Sharn, and the Sharn they're good guys, but man, do they look evil. Yeah. They just look like horrible things with fangs, and they're eyeless and whatever. But they're powerful sorcerers, and the Sharn were what was responsible for taking the Faerûn and locking them back in the Underdark.
Oh.
So, for all intents and purposes, the Faerûn are down there, locked in the Underdark. But if you were like, say, you're rolling up a Bedin party, it could be that, one of the Faerûn has come out. You got to get him back. You got to kill him or hunt him down. Another thing could be one of your tribe members has gone off and gotten lost in a Netherese dungeon. If you had one Bedin character and you wound up in an arc, then they would have knowledge. They could almost be like a ranger of sorts to guide the rest of the party through the desert,
right?
And cool. Know about kind of like how to survive and all the different kinds of monsters that are there and tracks, and like you see like a sloughed off skin and you're like, oh, it's a Yuan-Ti enclave coming up, we better do this. Or
are there Yuan-Ti in the Anauroch desert too?
Yeah, you can have Yuan-Ti, you can have, I like the idea of genies. I love like you could have a Netherese mummy lord.
What? Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it'd be horrible. And but yeah, you go into a dungeon that's just full of undead, like undead Netherese. And who knows what the wizards did? I mean, when Karsus blew it and just everything fell apart, there was probably immense amounts of wreckage. But I mean, probably a good portion of those wizards survived, and then they were either thought to themselves, because there was a diaspora of the Netheries after that. Yeah. They were just like, well, that's the end of that. Guess we're done.
And they went out to form a lot of the nations that we know about now.
Yeah. Fae, and Haurua, they took that knowledge and went and started stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
So, but some of them might have stayed, and some of them may have even, become liches and just thought, I'm just going to hang here and try to because there were the Nether Scrolls. Like the Nether Scrolls were scattered everywhere.
Oh, because they were all in the cities.
Yeah, some of them were stolen and taken. Some of them were destroyed. Some of them went missing.
What about the Mythalars?
There are Mythalars there. Yeah, I mean,
because they weren't necessarily destroyed when the cities fell.
No, I mean, some of them could have stayed around. It's undetermined as to when Mistral shut down all magic and then was reborn as Mistra, what happened to the Mythalars? Were they just powered down? I want to say that they're out there, and you can find one. And holy smokes, if you do, you might not even understand how the heck to use it.
Are they like a Chernobyl or like a nuclear thing where they're actually breaking down and melting at this point?
It's probably some of them could be that. Some of them could be you could walk within 100 yards of them, and then all of a sudden your just flesh just goes off your body. Some of them could be kind of like the what the cube in the Marvel movies, what the heck was the Tesseract? They're like the Tesseract. It's like this incredibly powerful thing that can do all kinds of godlike stuff.
Are they that small? Is it portable?
Yeah, some of them, could be this big. I mean, you could say one's as big as this room. However, if you want to fit it in your game, there was no real.
They didn't all look the same. No. They all were different.
Yep, they could all be just different kinds of things.
That's really interesting. So I'm getting all these kind of story hooks in my brain about people finding out about this, even in Waterdeep or Baldur's Gate, and wanting to be we need to get there because it's going to be the most powerful thing that's going to be necessary, and you're the only party that we trust to do that, and you got to get a guide, and almost make it like a Indiana Jones. You got to get the Ark before the bad people get it.
For
right?
Sure. Yeah, because the Mythalar, there's the wizard Iolam. He was the one who invented the Mythalars, and basically what he did was he took this thing, and after he played around with it for a while, he went up to a mountain and just went honk and just cut the top off the mountain and then flipped it and just building the city on top of that.
And that was the first floating city.
First floating city. Oh. And that's how it happened. And you could just imagine, he's like, I'm going to do something with this thing. And the wizards are like, okay. And they all walk out into the plain, and their big mountain, it's just like going to Mount Rainier and just chopping the top off of it and then flipping it in midair, and all the clouds and atmosphere is moving back.
That's amazing.
And he's like, that's what this thing can do. And now Mistra's not that tough. We could be like gods. I just did a godlike thing. Who the heck has ever done that? So,
and then being able to share that with the rest of the Netheries, most powerful wizards. So that there's, how many Mythalars were made?
Unknown.
And so there could be any number of them under the Anauroch Desert right now.
Yeah, just sitting there waiting, and they are super dangerous. On top of that, Nether Scrolls.
Yeah.
They went missing. Who knows where they went? They could have been, people might have them and not even know it. It's like having a Van Gogh in your attic and just that's a crazy painting my granddad had, I don't know.
Some guy with an ear cut off. Who cares?
Whatever, But Mythalar, same, Nether Scroll, same thing. It could be in a case, like an old stone sealed case in somebody's attic or in a basement somewhere or in a dungeon.
Or it could be on the wall of a tent of a Badine people who are like, oh yeah, no, this is just something we've handed down for generation to generation. It looks cool, right?
Yeah. If it gets cold at night and we're chilly and we don't have fuel, we'll just put that in there, and it's really warm because it's radiating heat all the time. He's like, oh, okay. Oh, great.
That happens all the time, right? You just paper makes heat, right?
Yeah.
Is it made from paper? Is it actually like a scroll, like the Nether Scrolls?
It could be. It could be hammered metal. It could be dimensional. When you open it up, it's like an extra dimensional energy. Oh. It could be anything, any way you want to imagine it. So I think the traditionally thing was just like regular paper scroll, but it came from the High Elves. So there was an elven ruin I used to know the name of it. I don't know it now. It's like begins with A. And but yeah, when the humans discovered that, they went to a high elven room and they snooped around. They got in there and they got these things. It was like it's like kind of like the Nag Hammadi scrolls when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah,
it's like they were in these jars or whatever. That was in this ancient high elven temple. They got them and they're like, "What are these things?" And they read them and they were just like,
"Oh, this is so much power."
Yeah,
right.
And probably 99% of Netherese people had no idea what the hell that was talking about. But the one person who did was like, holy crap, is like the Einstein of the Netherese. And that person unlocked basically the weave. And that was the big problem.
And all of that is now underneath the desert, waiting for adventurers to save it.
What?
Or destroy the world.
Destroy the world. Don't go and get the Netherese scrolls. Don't do
look at it. Close your eyes, Marion. Close your eyes.
Yeah, don't look.
All right, that's awesome. I have so many stories I want to tell now in my head. So thank you, Mr. Adam Lee, for that. If people want to get in touch with you and ask you more questions about the Netherese and genies, how do they do that?
Adam of Adventure, at Adam of Adventure, yes.
On the Twitters.
On the Twitters, yes.
Excellent.
Press
awesome.
the blue bird.
Thank you so much. We'll be back with some more fun lore next week.
Wow.